We're learning a new mimer today. We're starting. This is a mimer. Now we have Purim coming up in less than a month. So it's a mimer the Rebbe said on Purim in Tafshin Yud Gimel. Purim in 1953. But there's an interesting backstory to this mimer. So Purim 1953, the Farbrengen started as generally the Purim Farbrengens, in the evening, and it actually started with a mimer. The Rebbe started Farbrengen, saying in English, the Rebbe started, the first thing was a mimer. The mimer was Vayhi Oimenes Hadasa, is a mimer that the Rebbe said to open the Farbrengen. And then were Sichos. And as was the case with the Purim Farbrengens, it went on late into the night. And so the Farbrengen was going on and on many hours in, and it was already in the wee hours of the morning. It was probably 2, 3 in the morning. And suddenly, the Rebbe's face and complexion started to change a little bit. And it became noticeable that the Rebbe was going to say another mimer. It was something that, so in the earlier years, I wasn't around, but in the earlier years, in later years it wasn't the same, but in the earlier years, apparently, people that were there would say that you were able to tell when a mimer was coming, that the Rebbe's demeanor changed, even his complexion, even his complexion changed as he was leading up to a mimer. It was apparent that there was. Anyhow, so it seemed that which was unusual, that there should be a second mimer on Purim at the Farbrengen. Why would there be a second mimer? Anyway, but that's what it seemed was coming. This is like late into the night. Anyway, the Rebbe, usually when the Rebbe would say a mimer, he would generally, not always, but he would generally motion them to start a niggin, and they would start a niggin as they did in the beginning of the Farbrengen, the first time. But here, the Rebbe started to tell a story, and he said that when the Tsar fell in Russia. So he abdicated it was 1917, probably was when it was, roughly, right? So 1917, the Tsar fell. That's how he started, right? That the Tsar was no longer, and they were trying to reform in Russia. Back at that, there's a little window of time when there were a bunch of different parties that were wrestling for power, and they were trying to make it more democratic, and they had elections. And the Rebbe Rashab had encouraged Chassidim to vote in the election, vote for the party, for the people that he felt would be better for the Jews. There were meetings and all kinds of things, but that was, the Rebbe Rashab wanted people to vote. So we actually told part of the story, I think, when we were learning last mimer. So there was a Chassid who was totally removed from everything that was going on in politics and in Russia and in government. He was a batlin, he had no idea what was going on, but the Rebbe says to vote. So he went to the mikveh in the morning. The Rebbe mentions in the story. He went to the mikveh, he put on his gartel, and he went to vote. He comes to vote, and he had no idea what was going on, but he goes in, they showed him where he hears that people, everybody, you go today even to polling stations, you're inundated with people working for different campaigns, vote for this one, vote for that, they're handing you flyers, right? There are signs everywhere, posters, and so there you had a bunch of people that were very passionate about the politics that were shouting, "Hurrah!" In Russian, you'd say "Ura." In English, it would translate as "hurrah" or "hooray." It's basically the same thing. That's what they were saying, "Ura," and he hears "Ura," so he didn't know what was going on. That was the way they were showing their support. So he starts screaming "Hurrah!" Now, "Hurrah" is a cheer, obviously, showing support. "Hurrah" in Hebrew, "Ra" is bad, is evil. He didn't know from anything. He hears them saying "Hurrah," so he's shouting "Hurrah" at the top of his lungs with all his enthusiasm to fulfill the instruction of the Rebbe. He's shouting "Hurrah," and the Rebbe's telling the story, and the Rebbe starts saying "Hurrah," and the Rebbe motions to the crowd, and suddenly everybody in the crowd screams "Hurrah," and everybody was sort of swept up in the moment, and they all are screaming "Hurrah" 3 times. They finish saying "Hurrah," and the Rebbe immediately starts Kein Purim. Like that was the introduction to the mimer. Hurrah! Everybody's screaming "Hurrah!" and then Kein Kor. So everybody realized that something was going on, right? This introduction, the fall of the Tsar, Hurrah! Right into a new. Everybody knew that something was going on. Nobody had any idea what was going on. Anyway, as it would turn out, earlier that day in Russia, Stalin, Yamach Shemoy, had suffered a brain hemorrhage and was found unconscious. And this is 1953. This is communist Russia, right? So the Rebbe is telling a story that had happened 1917, but not many years before, before communism took root. But here, this is at the height of communism, and word would not get out. Obviously, the Russians would control everything. The word didn't get out till later. He died. He ends up dying 4 days later. But at the time, the Rebbe said the Maimer, there was no news of anything happening in Russia. But that's what happened. The Rebbe says this Maimer, and anyway, what's interesting is that the Maimer was prepared for publication. So they prepared it for publication for the Rebbe to edit and review, and they did this for Purim 1991, Tafshin and Aleph. And they wrote in the Pesach Hadavar, in the introduction to the Maimer, the Rebbe would, when he would review the Maimer, he wouldn't only review the Maimer. The Maimarim, the Rebbe's edited Maimarim are printed in a series called Sefer HaMaimarim Malukit, right, which is means a collection of discourses. Why is it a collection? Because they would come out in different. They would each come out on their own as its own booklet, and then eventually they put them together. They combine them all into full volumes of Maimarim. But they would come out as a likut, as an individual booklet, as a pamphlet or booklet. Anyway, so each one came with its own cover and its own introduction, right? And the books the copies that we're studying from now, they put them all together. Now that it's in one book, so you didn't print all the introductions in this formal sense, but they include it on the bottom. Why? Because in the footnote we have here in the star on our copies, because the Rebbe would also proofread and edit the introductions. And the Rebbe spent a lot of time on them. He gave it a lot of attention. The Rebbe would change the date or write something about the date. The Rebbe, all of those were also edited by the Rebbe. So in the introduction to the Maimer, they wrote a synopsis of what had happened. The Chassidim always had seen what happened at the time of Purim. Then afterwards you find out what happened in Russia at that time that the Rebbe was saying the Maimer. And so they always felt that it was connected, right? So, but there was no... As far as I know, I don't think there was ever any reaction from the Rebbe about it, or any Rebbe comment on it. It was what it was that happened, and that was it. But when they prepared it, so they write the story, and the Rebbe left it as is. So he sort of authorized that. We'll read it inside in a moment. That connection that the Maimer was said at the time of Purim, 1953, in connection with the events that were happening in Russia. What's even more interesting is that the Rebbe says this Maimer, and Stalin falls. And the Maimer is edited by the Rebbe and published for Purim 1991, which was, of course, the end of the Gulf War. Right? The Gulf War was going on, and there were great miracles that had happened then, obviously, as we all recall. And it ended on Purim that year. So it's an interesting little historical anecdote, background to the Maimer. Let's take a look. Okay, so let's get inside here. Purim, Maimer Beis, Tafshin, it's the second Maimer, as we just described. Let's take a look at the star, because it's just interesting here. Right, so it came out as it was printed for Purim, Tafshin and Aleph, Tafnun Shin Aleph, L'Krasiyam Purim Aleph, Yud Aleph Adar Shnas Tafnun Shin Aleph. That was the date that it was printed, and he says like this: Amiras Maimer Zeh. This Maimer was said Hamaimer Hasheni, the second Maimer, because Noisef al Maimer Rishon Divrei Maschal Vayim Sadas. In addition to the first Maimer, right? Vayihi Aymin Shenemar B'Svadas the Purim B'Shana Ahi, which was said Purim of that year, 1953. Hoysakshura Kenira Imahama Urois Sheiru B'Tkufa Hahi. Seemingly was connected with the events that occurred at that time, Adlam Apalasi Shal Maishal the Medina Ahi Shayitzar Yisrael, right, to the fall, the ultimate demise of the leader of that country, who was a terrible antagonist of the Jewish people, an enemy of the Jews. As was understood by the people at the Farbrengen, from the story that the Rebbe had told at the time, the Rebbe told it as an introduction, right, leading to Maimer. As we mentioned, the story went right into the Maimer. The story that the Rebbe told, which was connected with the episode of the Rebbe Rashab that happened when the Tsar had fallen. Okay, so that's the story with that. Yeah. Okay. So let's get into the Maimer. Okay. Kein Purim al Shem Purim. The pasuk in the Megillah says that these days are called Purim. Why do we call this holiday Purim? Al Shem Pur, because of the lottery that Haman, the lots that Haman cast to determine the date to destroy the people. So it's known Shmoy shall call Davar Meiral in Yaner, that the name of everything of any particular thing expresses its essence. So move on. So if the day of Purim, these days are called Purim, and what's the reason of Purim? Why is it called Purim? Because of the Geirol, because of the Pur, because of the lot. So then the primary thing of Purim is the lottery, right? As the Megillah itself says, Pur hu ha-Geirol, right? The Megillah translates the word Pur. Pur is a Persian word, so it translates it Pur hu ha-Geirol. Okay. So Tzarech Lahavin, we have to understand, as Alter Rebbe asks in his Maimer, by the same title, seemingly, this is not this idea that the lottery that was the lots that Haman cast is not the main part of the miracle. We'll see in a moment. The Rebbe brackets the text there, Iker. In Torah, the Alter Rebbe says that loiza haya Iker anes. The Rebbe here bracketed the word Iker, the main, the primary ness, right? So he says in note 5, yeah, Kein b'Torah this is an Torah, that it says that it's not, that the question is that the lots doesn't seem to be the main part of the miracle. So the Rebbe says, "V'ulay yefshel leimar shegam zeh shenafal pur b'chodesh adar hu nes kedel gama b'frim." In other words, the Rebbe kind of has a difficulty here with the term. The question could just be, does it seem the Pur is not the miracle of Purim? You think about the miracle of Purim, you're not going to think of Haman casting lots. But the Alter Rebbe says it's not the main ness. Why? So the Rebbe says you could say perhaps that because there is a miracle related to the casting of the lots, because the lots fell out in the month of Adar, right? And that itself is a ness, as we're going to say soon inside in a couple lines. So okay, so that's why he says that it's not the main ness. But either way, we'll see soon. We'll finish this. We'll develop this question further. What? Yeah. So the Haisif, Ta'Geirol Sheipil Haman, Leirak Shalei Hayanes Ala Adra. So first of all, the question is why we quoted. The Rebbe says Al Pi Hayidu Etzno. Now the Rebbe brings the Shaykh V'Munah. It's brought that all over that the name of something, certainly its Jewish name, its Hebrew name, shows its essence, shows what it's all about, right? So if it's called Purim because of the Pur, if the name is Purim, it means that name expresses the primary thing that we're observing on Purim. So what's the primary thing then? If it's Purim, it's the lots. So that's that leads to the question. That doesn't seem to be the primary miracle of Purim. The primary thing that you're going to go to, if you think about the story of Purim, is not the lots that Haman cast. So that's number one. But number two, you would say that it's not only is it not the main miracle, but you'd say that it's not even a miracle altogether. Not only was Haman's casting lots not part of the miracle, but you could say but it actually was part of the decree. The very pasuk that says that it was called Purim because of the Pur. It said, what does Pur have to do with anything? The lot. It says because he cast a lot in order to terrify and to destroy the people, to exterminate the Jews. So that's what the lots were about. They're about the decree, about the threat against the people. So the fact that these days are called Purim because of the Pur, because of the lot, so it seems that this lot that is cast, that is the main miracle of Purim. To the extent that the miracle of Purim is called by this specific name of Purim about the lots. So the miracle of the lots has to be seemingly the main, the central story and the central miracle of Purim. Okay? So how could that be? So the Rebbe says like this. So maybe we could say that what's the point of the miracle of Purim? So based on what the Gemara says, the Gemara says that when Haman was casting lots, when the lots fell on Adar, so Haman was very happy. Why? Because he said, Nafali Pur b'yerach shemeis b'Moshe, that the lot fell into the month of that Moshe Rabbeinu dies. He didn't realize, he didn't know that true that Moshe passed away on the 7th of Adar, but Moshe was also born on the 7th of Adar. So he didn't know that. So you could say that what's the miracle of Purim? Why is it called the Pur? Because Haman casts lots and to annihilate the Jews. The lot falls out on the month of Adar. So as it turns out, the month of Adar, since that's when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, so that maybe is what leads to the miracle, to that transformation. So you could say that's why that's the miracle, right? The miracle was that the lot fell into the month of Adar, a favorable month. The month in which Moshe Rabbeinu, the Redeemer of Israel, was born. Nevertheless, this is not a sufficient answer. Why? If we're going to say that the miracle, this is, by the way, seemingly this is an effort trying to get to, like the Rebbe is explaining why the Alter Rebbe says Ikar Nes. You can't dismiss it that it's not a miracle, but it's not the whole story. Why? Because if you want to say that, what's the miracle of the lot? That the lot fell in the month of Adar. So Haman is excited, falls into Adar, because he says that's when Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. So that's the demise, so to speak, of a Jewish redeemer. So then it shows that, God forbid, that it's not that he's going to be successful. But he doesn't realize that that's when the Redeemer of Israel is actually born. So the miracle is that he casts a lot, and a lot falls in a favorable month, the month of Adar. But if so, what's the miracle? The miracle is that it's the month of Adar, not that he cast lots. The fact that it fell in Adar is the result of him casting lots. So if the miracle is that it fell in the month of Adar, so then call Purim Adar, or something along the call it whatever. Call it something that expresses that point. But when you're calling it Purim, that's the lot that he cast. So the miracle of it falling in Purim is the result of the casting of the lots. So could you say the lot itself is the miracle? No. Right, so that's the problem, right? So we're saying that the miracle is the lottery itself. What's the explanation? Is the Geirel in Yinai Lebi Yoser. Geirel, this idea of lots, of lottery, this sort of chance, that is a very high level. And from there, the miracle comes. The miracle of Purim came from this very high level, this notion of lottery. So the Rebbe says that Purim, the main thing is that there's this idea of lots, the level of chance. That is the miracle. Everything else, all the other miracles of Purim, because there are a bunch of different things that happened in Purim that were miraculous. All of those other miracles they all stem from the primary miracle, which is the lottery. So we didn't answer the question. Or in other words, we need to explain then what's so great about the lottery that it would be called lottery. So the question was, why is it called Purim? The premise is, if it's called Purim, then that means that the lottery, is the primary miracle, from which all the other miracles come. So now we have to understand, what does that mean? So we said that Purim is a very high thing. The idea of lottery is a very high concept. So now the question is, now we need to explain what exactly that is. Yep? Okay. So if Yuvan Zalpi, what do you want to ask?
What is miraculous about a lottery?
Oh, so that's what we're going to get into. Okay. Yeah, that's the question. Okay. So if Yuvan Zalpi, Amavur, B'Teira'er, the Purim, Yom Kippurim, Shayachim Zalazeh. So Rebbe says we can explain it based on, the Alter Rebbe explains in Teira'er that Purim and Yom Kippur are connected. The Pirush Yom Kippurim hu Kimoi Purim. That when we call it Yom Kippurim, Yom HaKippurim, right, is Kippurim. So the Alter Rebbe explains that Kippurim means that it's like Purim. Right? And the Yisayim is with the Mizeh Sheyom HaKippurim hu Kippurim b'chaf hadim b'vad muchash HaPurim unai liyesim Yom HaKippurim. And the fact that we're saying that Yom Kippur, what are we comparing to what? So the Rebbe says we're comparing in the words Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is Kippurim. So what's compared to what? Yom Kippur is compared to Purim. So when you compare one thing to another, what's the higher thing? The thing that it's being compared to, right? So in this scenario, then Purim is higher, and Yom Kippur is like Purim, meaning that Purim is higher. So two things. Number one, we have that Purim and Yom Kippur are connected. Seemingly, they would have no connection on the surface. One is a serious fast day, the other day is a day of celebration. So number one, that's already a chiddush, to say that there's a connection between the two. But then even more so, the Rebbe is saying that Yom Kippur means that Purim is higher than Yom Kippur. Okay, so what's the connection? So he said that. Okay, let's get through the paragraph. So Mashayich is Yom Kippur and Purim. What's the connection between Yom Kippur and Purim? Is the similarity between them is that they both have this idea of lottery. Right, Purim, we talk about the Pur, that Haman, the lots that Haman cast. And Yom Kippur, what do we have? How do we have a lottery of Yom Kippur? Because we have Yom Kippur, one of the central services of Yom Kippur was the Kein Gadol casting lots between the two goats. One that was offered in the Beis Hamikdash, the other one that was the Seir Lazazel, the two Seirim. Right? So we have, and how did he determine it? It was with lots. He took a card out of a box. So we see the connection the similarity between the two of them is that they both have this concept of lots. But another connection is that they are both higher than Havaya. The B'yem HaKippurim ksiv lifnei Havaya titaru, l'maylam Havaya. It says in Yom Kippur, Kibim is a chaper aleichem utar eschem, right? Lifnei Hashem titaru. It's pasuk we read in the davening, we read in the kriya, that it says that Yom Kippur is a day of atonement. Lifnei Hashem titaru, you are purified before God. So what's before God mean? So this explains, Lifnei Havaya means l'mayla, higher than Havaya. Lifnei, before, higher than, above Havaya. So that the atonement of Yom Kippur comes from a place that's higher than this level of Havaya. וגם in Yom Purim ידוע, הטעם שלו נזכר שם הוויה בכל מגילת אסתר, ולפי שבפורים הוא גילה ערן סוף של המעלה הוויה. Why is it that Purim, so we see that, number one is the connection we see is the lots. Right, on Purim we have the lot, the Pur of Haman, and on Yom Kippur we have the lot of the Kein Gadol by the Seir. Another thing is that on Yom Kippur the atonement comes from Lifnei Havaya, a level that's higher than Havaya. And how do we see this in Purim? Because Purim, we know the Megillah doesn't have the name of Hashem mentioned in it at all. Right? It's the only book of the Kisvei, right? That it doesn't, no mention of Hashem. And if it's the only one, there's maybe another. So Lifnei Hashem. So why is that? So the truth is interesting. So the Rebbe explains here why, because the book, the Megillah, the story of Purim and the book of Esther is higher than Havaya. It's beyond it. So therefore there's no actual explicit mention of the name Havaya because it's actually higher than it. What's interesting is that Chazal say that why is the name of Havaya, why is Hashem's name not mentioned in the Megillah? Because the Chachamim were afraid that when the Persians are going to translate it, they were living in Persia. They were under the Persian Empire. So the Persians are going to translate it, and then they were afraid that they would translate the name of God to their idolatrous God's name. They didn't want that to happen. So therefore, Hashem's name is not mentioned. So when they translated, they couldn't sort of pervert it in that sense, right? And transform it to something idolatrous. So that would seem to be a very low thing. Why didn't we mention Hashem's name? Because we're worried about idolatry. It's like, and Chassidus explains the opposite. Why isn't it not mentioned? Because it's higher than the name. So the name is already a lower level, the name Havaya. And Purim is higher than it. So the truth is there's really a connection between the two. It's not, the Rebbe doesn't discuss it here, but there's a connection. The fact that it could come to, the miracle could come such a level that there's even fear of the name of Hashem being, that's a result of it, a sign that it comes from such a high level. Whatever, that's another topic. It's not for now. Okay, so what are we saying here? That Purim we have like this. We have the connection between them is that they're similar in that they're both they both have the idea of Goyrel. Then you have this idea that Lifnei Hashem, they're both higher than Havaya. So that's number one, that they're similar. But besides being similar, there's another thing, which is that Purim is actually higher than Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur is compared to Purim. Now, this idea of the connection between Purim and Yom Kippur is not the Chiddush only of the Alter Rebbe, it's actually brought in Kunei Zoyar. We're going to get to it in a moment. So, how are we doing on time? It's 9? Okay, so so maybe we'll get back to the artist and we'll get back to that. Let's keep going. Okay, so, but the point is that, okay, so let's get back. Let's keep going. So, so we can explain the connection between the two things, the similarity between Yom Kippur and Purim, that they both have the Goyrel, and also that they're both higher than Havaya. So Yuvan Bahaktim the Inyan HaGoyrel Hulamayla Maseichel. We can understand it by first understanding this concept of Goyrel altogether, this idea of lots, that lots are higher than intellect. Shaharei, because Goyrel Hu Bechlal Bishnei Dvarim Shavim. A lottery is generally, when we're talking about two things that are equal. Like for instance, the two goats of Yom Kippur. The halacha is that the two goats had to be similar in appearance, in size, and in value, right? In price. If one of them is one better, if one of them is better, there's no room for a lottery, right? Why? Because if one is better, you're going to choose the better one. Right? So we talk about lottery generally, and we'll get back to that moment why we're saying generally. So generally though, when we talk about lots, you're casting it on two things that are equal. You can't find a quality in one over the other, and that's why you have to cast lots. Right? And just like we find by the Seirim, that generally the ideal way to have that process was if you had two goats that were virtually identical. Okay. So since when you have two things that are the same, So your intellect can't decide which one to, you can't decide which one to choose because they're the same. If one has an advantage over the other, so then you can have a reason. Now, sometimes one has one advantage, another one has another advantage. So then you have to start weighing your mind. Which advantage you prefer, right? But the point is, you could come to some kind of an intelligent decision and decide on one versus the other based on its merits or the other one's flaws. But when they're equal, how are you going to go about assessing them and deciding them if they're truly equal? So you can't. So since you don't know what to do, so you rely on a lot. The lot obviously has nothing to do with intellect. So the same is true when we talk about in the analog. When we talk about with regard to heaven, the goyrel hulamayla meishtalshus. That goyrel, this level of goyrel, just as in intellect. So in human beings, when we cast lots, why do we cast lots? Because the intellect can't help us here. Because it can't make a determination. Everything's the same. So what do? You cast lots which are higher than the intellect. It's beyond it. Explain soon. The same is true with regard to above. When we talk about hishtalshus, we talk about goyrel. Goyrel is higher than hishtalshus, higher than the whole order of creation. Why? Because the chachma, hireishis hishtalshus. Chachma, the level of divine supernal wisdom, is the beginning of hishtalshus. That's the beginning of the evolutionary process of creation. The goyrel shuhulamayla me'achachma hulamayla me'hishtalshus. So goyrel, lots which are higher than chachma, would follow are also higher than hishtalshus. So based on this, so now that we established like this, that lottery is higher than intellect, beyond it. So if you have just as down here, when does a person cast lots? When he can't decide intellectually. So he casts lots, which is something that's even higher than intellect. Same is true above, that there's chachma from above. There's the way that the process in which Hashem creates the world that has an up and down, higher, lower, better, worse, right? Closer, further, and then there's beyond that, where everything's the same. That's lottery. So then what does this mean? When we say that Purim and Kippur, they're similar, in that they both are this concept of Goyrol, we're talking about a revelation of godliness that's higher than creation. Right? So this is the meaning of what we said before, Lifnei Havaya, higher than Havaya. Right? This is an explanation. This is then the connection between these two things. We compare Purim to Yom Kippur. We said earlier the two connections are, one is that they both have lottery, and the other is that they're both higher than Havaya. What's one have to do with the other? Just to find two things, two similarities. What's the connection? So he explains. Why Havaya hu ishtalshus? Havaya represents, Havaya, the name of Hashem, that represents ishtalshus. As we know, Yud Chachma, Hey Bina V'chulu. So when we said that we find Goyrel by both of them, and they're both higher than Havaya. So now we can understand, since we understand now that Goyrel is higher than Ishtalshalos, higher than intellect, so now we understand how these two are really the same thing. Why do we find by Purim and Yom Kippur this idea of Goyrel, of lots? Because both of them are higher than Havaya. That's the level of Goyrel. Yeah? Okay, so what does this mean? So we know Yud Ke Vav Ke, the name of Hashem. So Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina, Vav would be the Midos, and Hey is Malchus. That would be how. So we see that Yud Ke Vav Ke, and you see it even in the shape. So Yud Ke Vav Ke represents the 10 spheres, the 10 attributes which make up Hishtalshlus, which make up creation. Creation starts with sort of the formation of the 10 spheres, right? That's symbolized by Yud Ke Vav Ke, by the name of Hashem. So when we say that Goyrel is higher than Chachma, Chachma is the beginning of the Esser spheres. It's the first one. First of the 10 attributes is Chachma. When you say that Goyrel is higher than Chachma, so it means that it's higher than Ishtalshalos. Right? So just as with a human being, when you have a Goyrel, you have two things that are equal, and you can't choose rationally, intellectually, you can't make an argument to choose one over the other. So that's where you defer to a Goyrel, to a lottery. So why? Because the lottery represents higher. How it represents higher, we have to still explain a little bit more. But let's go back to the footnotes here. Let's start really from the end and then work our way back up. Let's look at 19. Yeah, he says that Goyrel generally is when you have two equal things. So the truth is like this: a person can really decide that he doesn't want to use his intellect. Sometimes it's too exhausting to think something through, to analyze the situation and weigh the pros and the cons. And so they say, I'm just gonna give in to chance. I'm gonna cast a lot. I can't make an argument one way that it's too exhausting, right? So that, do you say that that's higher than intellect? That's lower than intellect. It's a person who's too lazy to use his intellect, right? So, and he uses a gairul, he uses lots, he uses chance, right? So that true, that's also lots, that's a gairul, but that's not the real gairul. So that's why the Rebbe says that the real inyan of gairul, the real thing is when you can't make a choice. Certainly you can defer to a gairul if you're just not interested in making a choice, but then that's lower than intellect, that's not higher, right? So look at note 19 here. Aval shayich gam b'dvarim she'enim shavim. Lots are also applicable even when two things are not equal. Even though if they're not equal, so then your intellect, since you're a human being and you're a rational person, so your intellect would compel you to choose a certain thing. Yeah, but still, you could still use chance there. Why? Because you could decide that I'm going to want what the lottery decides, not what my mind says. In other words, I could know. Maybe I could have two things. I could have a choice, and I can know that I should choose this one, not the other one. But I decide, even though I know that I should choose this, not the other, I choose not to act rationally. I choose to leave it up to chance, to lottery, and whatever that decides, that's what I'm going to want. So you could do that. Yeah. So quotes from Torah over here in Megillah Esther, where the Alter Rebbe says that a person could nullify he could renounce his choice, his free choice to choose something based on his intellect and choose to follow what the lottery determines, even if that goes against the way he understands it should be. Then he says, he quotes from Halacha, right, that by the Seirim, by the two goats, they're supposed to be similar in every way. Now, if they weren't similar, it's also kosher, right? It wasn't that if you couldn't find two identical goats, you couldn't do the lottery. Right? So it says like this, Harder 20, he quotes from the Gemara Yuma and from the Rambam. It says like this, even if they're not equal, right? It's still a kosher, it's still a valid lottery. Why? Because even when they're not equal, you could still have a goyrel. The true, sorry? By the Nachlav, and they're dividing it. Yeah, right, you had the two things, yeah. You have the whole arichas on it. Yeah. The point is that it's possible. So, in other words, the point that I was making here is that you can make an argument that there's a lottery that you have where it's not rational, or you decide you're going to ignore your rationale. You'll ignore your reasoning for whatever you're going to choose, and you're just going to rely on a goyrel. But that's the emphasis that he's making here. That really the true. When we're going to talk about goyrel as it is l'mayla, as it is in heaven. See, as it is with us. Yeah, we have the option. We go higher than seichel, we go lower than seichel. We can do it rationally. We can do it irrationally. We can be superstitious. Whatever we can be. But when we're talking about l'mayla, you're talking about in the animal, you're talking about in heaven. So there, it's not that you choose to go lower than rationale. There's rationale, there's reason, and then there's higher than it. So when we're talking about the true meaning of goyrel, as we're trying to understand what that concept of lottery is by God, what it means in the higher realms, so the true one is when they're the same, where intellect cannot help you. That's where you have real goyrel, real lots, which are beyond intellect. Okay, and we'll see soon that it's actually even higher than it even goes higher. But let's take a look at note 9. Right, we still have a few minutes. Interesting. The Rebbe says like this. We said it's a famous line, right? That Yom Kippur is like Purim. Yom HaKippurim. Yeah.
Number 9.
Yeah. Note 9. Footnote 9. So it sounds like a chassid javot, but the truth is it's in the Tikkun Zohar, except that in the Tikkun Zohar it's not exactly like that. So it says like this. Regam Tikkun Zohar, where it says over there that Purim is Keriyas al Shem Yom HaKippurim. Over there it says Purim is called. Why is it called Purim? Because of Yom Kippur. So here, so what do we have? If that's really all. And then it goes a little thing about Purim and different things from the Megillah, but the connection between Purim and Yom Kippur, as it's worded in the Tikkun Zohar, is that Purim is called Purim because of Yom Kippur, which means what is being compared to what? That Purim is being compared to Yom Kippur. In here, we're talking about the Alter Rebbe says that Yom Kippur is compared to Purim. In the Tikkun Zohar, there's so the connection exists. That is that we find in the Tikkun Zohar. But the way it's listed is different, yeah? It says like this. Right? In the Torah, we're saying that Yom HaKippurim, Chaf HaDimyon, it's that Yom Kippur is compared to Purim, which means that Purim is higher. But in the Tikkun Zohar, it's saying Purim is called like Yom Kippur, meaning that Purim is compared to Yom Kippur, which means Yom Kippur is hard. So the L'Pirish Tikkun Zohar Purim Nikra Al Shem Yom Kippurim Yom Kippurim L'Maylam Purim. Based on the Tikkun Zohar, it comes out that Yom Kippur is higher than Purim. Or L'Pirish Torah Shem Kippurim Hu Kippurim Chafadim Bilvad Purim L'Maylam Yom Kippurim. From the Torah, from the Alter Rebbe, it seems the opposite, that Yom Kippur, that Purim is higher than Yom Kippur. So Rebbe says like this: V'hina b'Tikkun Zohar Sham Purim Iskarias Al Shem Yom Kippurim. The Zohar continues. Why is Purim called like Yom Kippur? Because Dasidin lis angabei ulishnui le meinui la'enig. Says because why is Purim called like Yom Kippur? Because la'asadav when Mashiach comes, Yom Kippur is going to be a day of pleasure. We're going to have pleasure, that we're going to delight on that day, and it's going to be transformed from a day of persecution, right, of inui, of suffering, to a day of pleasure. So says we can say, although not b'deichik. The Mashakas b'Torah Oish Yom Kippurim who K'may Purim who b'Negei Yom Kippurim K'may Shu Achshav Yom Inui. So the Rebbe says you could say that they're talking about two different things. They're not really arguing. The Alter Rebbe is talking about now. Nowadays, what's higher? Purim is higher. Why? Because Yom Kippur is a day of suffering, and Purim is a day of pleasure, of joy. When the Zohar, the Tikkun Zohar, is comparing Purim to Yom Kippur, it's talking about Yom Kippur as its loss of it. Why is Purim compared to Yom Kippur? Because eventually Yom Kippur is going to be a day of pleasure. So in other words, the Purim today is compared to Yom Kippur of La'asid Lavei, not the Purim today, not the Yom Kippur of today, right? That we can say maybe like that, right? That's Sidin L'Sangachul. So that the episode we can say, but he says that's not. It's not. It doesn't fit. This answer is not a sufficient. It's not a good enough answer. He says why? Because labir delakaman siv dalad shagoyel de Kippurim hu rak benegel l'shnei seirim. Kein labir shebter shalom shebar 30. Ein chiluk l'chayra ben Yom Kippurim achshav Yom Kippurim l'asad lavei. Kippurim gam izeh shegam l'asad lavei yenikar b'shem Yom Kippurim. So he says ultimately the answer is not sufficient because first of all we're going to see later in the Maimer that Yom Kippur, if we're talking about the Pur, that part of Yom Kippur, so that's only one part of Yom Kippur. It's not the whole Yom Kippur. Whereas Purim, it's the whole Purim. So that's true today and La'asad Lavei. And also, even La'asad Lavei is going to be called Yom Kippurim. So even though La'asad Lavei, when Mashiach comes, you want to say that then Yom Kippur is going to be a day of pleasure. So therefore, then Yom Kippur would be higher than Purim. But even then, it's still going to be called Yom Kippur. It's still going to be compared to Purim. So the answer is not a perfect answer, but we have we find an early source on this concept of the connection and the different ways of understanding.